This episode of Keys to the Shop is brought to you by Prima Coffee. Whether it's espresso machines, manual brewing devices, or general coffee shop needs, they seek to pursue the most innovative coffee products, both domestic and abroad, to offer their customers. Find out more at prima-coffee.com. This is Keys to the Shop, episode 45, Simple, Powerful Hospitality, with Philip Paul Turner of Sunergos Coffee. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we seek to give you insights, inspiration, and the tools that you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio. I'm your host for Keys to the Shop, and today we are discussing hospitality. So hospitality is something that's talked about often. There are entire books written on hospitality. Of course, one of the best ones out there is Danny Meyer's book, Setting the Table, and many other people have written on the subject, and there are lots of different takes on how to practice hospitality within your company. And of course, there is no one right way necessarily, but there are some core principles, and there are some things that everybody can do, no matter where you work, that will lead you down the right path and kind of set your trajectory for good hospitality for your circumstance and in your context. And today's guest is going to help us with that quest to look at the core of what hospitality truly starts with. I'm really excited to share with you today a conversation that I had with someone who I get to work with all the time, very closely here at Sunergos Coffee. He is the manager of our downtown store on 5th Street at Sunergos. His name is Philip Paul Turner, and he, if you know this man, is a hospitality powerhouse. We all talk about making somebody feel better when they leave than when they came in. Well, Philip embodies this to the degree that he is just used naturally as an example of the kind of friendliness and the kind of service and preemptive planning and thinking about others and making sure that every person feels valuable. That kind of example is something that we want for everyone on our staff, and we're really grateful to have him as an example within the company. So Philip has been working in coffee for about 11 years now and practicing hospitality that whole time, always kind of with a bent of finding out how much he can do to really improve the customer's life as far as it depends upon him, wherever he is. And while here at Sunergos, he came up with three things. Let's say it's kind of his mantra when talking with his staff, and it's something that I've taken, and I've also encouraged all of us as managers and leaders within the organization to think of when thinking of hospitality, because these three things are essential human needs that we could base all of our hospitality on. So in this conversation with Philip, you're going to hear from somebody who really puts into practice what he preaches. And I know of no better person to talk about hospitality. Literally, I honestly don't. I can't imagine talking to anyone else about this. And I feel like that's saying something because I've been around the industry for quite a while. But you're going to hear what that mantra is, what the components of that mantra are, and we're going to talk a little bit more about each one of them in depth. And my hope is that you walk away from this feeling empowered to practice hospitality because it's simple, but it's powerful. And that's why it's just simple, powerful hospitality. And it's based on this mantra that Philip has. And so I'm just really excited to share this conversation with you. So let's get to our conversation now with Philip Paul Turner of Sunergos Coffee. All right. So Philip Paul Turner, welcome to Keys to the Shop.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Chris.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here too. So we're here in the store at 5th Street, Sunergos Coffee in Louisville, where you manage. We're here to talk about your amazing service and hospitality. Yeah, don't you think you have amazing service and hospitality?
Well, I strive for that.
Yeah. We all do, and that's one of the reasons I've wanted to have you on the show for a long time, is because I get to see it firsthand, and anyone who comes into Fifth Street will get to experience it firsthand. And so anyone in the audience, I think, hearing this episode today is going to benefit from what you have to share and where your philosophy comes from. So, before we get into that, though, you've been in coffee now for about 11 years. How did you end up getting started in coffee and arriving here to this place now at Sunergos?
Yeah, so I started in coffee down in Florida in 2007, and I just needed a job. I hadn't really even been a big coffee fan before that, but just needed a job. Got one at Starbucks. It was very attractive to me. I was very I love being around people. It was a very good environment for being around people. Worked there for about 4.5 years. I started in Florida, then moved up to Nashville. Like they transfer people. They have a good program for transferring, and transferred from Florida to the Nashville area, where I worked at a few different shops around Nashville for a few years, and learned a lot about customer service. Customer service is definitely a focus of Starbucks. So that was a part of it. Another part of it was learning the hard way through saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing. And Starbucks is a very comfortable place for so many people that it feels like if something goes wrong, it's that much more worse. So learned a lot about customer service at Starbucks. Worked with fantastic people. Worked there for a few years, and then worked at Frothy Monkey in Nashville, which was a blast. Again, worked with just the best people and served wonderful people. And it was very busy. That shop is very busy. They have a great product, certainly, and the people that work there are wonderful. And it's lined to the door all the time. It feels like. So I really had to try to learn how to offer as much as I could in such a short amount of time. So I kind of learned a bit about that, and then more about saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing. Probably for the rest of my life. But
was that always a bent that you had? Was in the situations where you were to try to figure out the best way to deliver that kind of hospitality and service?
I guess so. I haven't, it's funny. I haven't really thought a lot about this. A lot of it is intuitive. But I find that to be true. If I have an experience that is undesirable because I said the wrong thing, I should probably, change a part about that. So
yeah. I mean, it's not always the most common thing for somebody to immediately think, well, I should change. Oftentimes I feel like in baristas, or maybe just service in general, we think about, why did they react to that thing I said? They're just a jerk.
Yeah. And it wasn't your intention. Many things that went down were not my intention. Something went wrong in translation. So
it's an intuitive thing that you have
I
to
think so.
have a disposition of, how can I change to better accommodate this person? Okay. So you went from Frothy Monkey, and then how do you end up here?
Yeah. Well, I went through a big life transition, and moved here for family. And, of course was in coffee at that point for about 7 years. So, was very comfortable. My brother at the time worked here. And I loved the coffee. When I was in Nashville, when I came to Louisville, I would have to get some Sunergos coffee and a Nord's donut.
Right.
Of course.
That's the thing you do.
Yeah. And, so I was already familiar with the product, familiar with several of the people, was fortunate enough to get hired, very graciously, and learned a lot. And it's been a wonderful ride so far.
Nice.
Here at Sunergos. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we absolutely love having you. I get to experience the service and hospitality that you bring to the table. It's one of the main reasons why you're a manager here at this store. I think you said something really important earlier, which was how you could try to pack as much value in hospitality into a small period of time. And we're sitting in a store right now where there are no seats, except for we just got patio tables for the first time in 6 years to put out.
Right. Yeah.
But the interactions here, when you get 6 people inside this space, it's really crammed. What is this, 300 square feet, maybe?
Yeah, I don't know. It's really small. It's probably smaller than what you're imagining right now if you're listening.
Yeah. It's pretty tight, but the experience that people have here is one that they always rave about. In your philosophy on service and hospitality is part of that. So I'm excited to get to have the Keys to the Shop audience familiar with your mantra. And if you've listened to, or if you've read the notes of the show, you've probably already seen what the mantra is. But one thing that Philip always says is that you are to make the guest feel acknowledged, welcomed, and included. So those three things come up a lot. And it's one of those mantras that it obviously doesn't come out of nowhere. But I mean, how did you come up with, for you, this just 3-step process of making sure that you're just covering all your bases?
Right. Well, a lot of the thought behind it is just a result of something that happened organically here in the shop, where some people would come in, order coffee, hang around for a minute, and drink it. And there would be conversation that came from that. And so I envisioned an ideal customer interaction. And in my head, it looked like someone walking in, some sort of acknowledgement of them being there, very important. And then at some point, a welcoming, them knowing that they were welcome there. And then, a possible opportunity to be included in a conversation or a moment or whatever. And just that vision kind of became acknowledge, welcome, include.
And is that something that I feel like that came from some manager or store meeting that you had, and it was shared there, and maybe where I first heard you say that.
Right. It was a store meeting. Yeah.
I'm of the opinion that, there are lots of ways that we can be hospitable, and there are whole books, 200, 300 more pages written on the subject of hospitality. And what I love about this is that it's so simple, but it covers all the bases for any visit in any type of store. But it gives flexibility too, because this isn't something just for a small store, is it?
Right. No, that's important. It is kind of vague. There's a lot that you could take from that.
So being vague, I think, is really good here, because if you base your hospitality on something that's very rigid, it really kind of falls into that area of prescriptive approaches where you're doing service like Danny Meyer says you don't want to do, which is doing service to somebody,
right,
rather than
not for them.
Right. We all read the book.
Yep, yeah. Fantastic book. Yes,
it is. So let's dive into these 3 things. First, you want to acknowledge that somebody is there. And it's one of those, like here, if you're working the espresso machine in one of our stores, you have what we call the first hello. That's an acknowledgement. It goes beyond that, though, because things are busy. Like, what does it look like for you, ideally, for somebody to have been acknowledged successfully?
Yeah, and I really do think that this could look different every single time it happens. I think just depending on the circumstance, because sometimes you're mid-conversation with a customer, which is desirable, and you want to acknowledge someone that comes in. It can just be just a raise of the eyebrows, eye contact, raise the eyebrows in a smiley face. I think people just on some level, most of us anyways, want to be acknowledged, and it doesn't take much. I think it's a very simple thing, eye contact, and it can be a hello for sure, but sometimes that's not practical. And so that's where welcoming would be different.
And that's something that everybody shares a responsibility to do, even though in our workflow it talks about having the responsibility. So one of the problems I see is that baristas will either consciously or subconsciously try to find a way to get out of talking with customers. So one of the ways that I think this can fall apart for people is there's this predisposition that baristas have, I think, and anyone in service that's task-oriented, to try to kind of wiggle out of acknowledging people. Like maybe it's the person next to them's job. Right. Do you see that sometimes?
Well, fortunately not here so much.
Oh, good.
But I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. And we are on the receiving end of that sometimes, where you can tell that somebody sees you, and they see you, but they don't acknowledge you in the way that you're saying. It's not enough to just know that somebody looked at you. They have to look at you, it sounds like, in a benevolent sort of, I'm glad to see you sort of way.
Yeah. Which is hard to teach someone. It kind of has to be there. Otherwise it wouldn't feel awesome, for the customer, but sometimes just eye contact is all it takes. Just positive eye contact.
Well, so what happens if a customer is not acknowledged?
I think for a lot of people it's fine, but I think that a lot of people have an expectation, and expectations are huge here. I think a lot of people, when they go to a place to receive anything, acknowledgement is huge, and if they have an expectation for it to be there and it's not, it's immediate disappointment, even on a small level, still matters.
So you're kind of setting yourself up to disappoint right from the beginning.
Yeah, you have to make up for ground already.
So somebody comes in the cafe, somebody is going to, a staff member is going to acknowledge them, give them a smile, raise of the eyebrow. We're not winking at people.
Right. Well, it depends on the person.
If we know them.
Right.
So that could go one way or it could go another.
Yeah.
But it's important that they're brought in with their dignity affirmed. And, oftentimes it seems like people are beat up when they come into a cafe. Maybe they've had to find a parking space and they couldn't, and it was just one more thing. That day was already really bad. We sit across from a courthouse downtown here at 5th Street, and man, there's a lot of tension that walks in that door.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of people needing a lawyer, or just seeing a lawyer, or they are a lawyer, or they work in the courts. There's a lot that goes on, a lot of tension, like you said. And
a lot of people are numbers. I mean, it's not just downtown or for people who wear, suits. It's just in our South End store as well. People are used to being looked over a lot of times in life. And as we become less social, face to face, we become easier to ignore. So, I love the idea that acknowledgement, it can be so powerful, but it's so simple.
That's right.
So before we continue on talking with Philip, I wanted to take a break and talk with you all about our sponsor, Prima Coffee. Prima Coffee is a specialty coffee equipment supplier based out of here in Louisville, Kentucky. And from the inception of their company, they have set out to make the best coffee brewing equipment available to the general public. Their focus is on curating the best equipment for every need, from grinders to espresso machines to under-counter fridges. They've got a very wide assortment of brewing devices and equipment for you to choose from. You should really go to prima-coffee.com to check out what they have to offer. They put a big emphasis on having the expertise to help their customers get the right gear to fit every situation. And speaking as a customer of theirs also in the shop where I work, I've always been pleased interacting with them, and their service just goes above and beyond. Really great group of professionals. So again, I really encourage you to go to prima-coffee.com, see what they have to offer you, give them a call, give them an email, tell them I said hello, and I think you're going to be really pleased with what you get from Prima Coffee. And my thanks to Prima for your support of Keys to the Shop, and also supporting us as an industry by providing us the tools that we need to do our jobs really well. So let's get back to my conversation with Philip Paul Turner. All right, so we've acknowledged people. They're in the store. We're doing good. Now it's time to welcome them. So what is the difference between welcoming somebody and acknowledging them? Because we can easily think of our acknowledgement as a welcome and just kind of, that's it, I'm done.
Yep, and I think sometimes it can be, but I think many times the acknowledgement is more immediate. Basically right when somebody walks in the door. And a welcoming can certainly happen then, but many times going the extra mile to make someone feel welcome, and very quickly assessing where they're at and how to communicate with them, as a lot of us do intuitively. That happens a little bit later at the register, or maybe even at the bar, depending if they have to order first before being rung up.
Yeah.
Welcoming is a little bit deeper, I feel like. A little bit more.
So you're rolling out the red carpet a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're now interacting with them. So does the process of talking with them sort of give you more information that you can use to make them feel more welcome?
Yeah. And a lot of that I feel like happens, intuitively.
So there is a difference between acknowledgement and welcoming. Welcoming seems to be something that you engage in that's a little bit more involved. It's more deep in custom to the person.
Right.
Can you explain a little bit more about, practically speaking, how would you guide a barista who's listening right now? If they were your barista, here's how you welcome somebody.
Right. Well, I would simply say, take whatever opportunity you can as someone enters the shop to make them feel welcome. That certainly wouldn't come without acknowledgement, of course.
Right.
Just by welcoming someone, you would acknowledge them. But not always do we acknowledge someone and have the opportunity to make them feel welcome. It usually takes a little bit more. Sometimes that happens at the register where you're talking with someone, but that just can't always happen when somebody walks in. And some shops are much bigger than this, and all you can do is, like, how you kind of wave with your head sometimes because your hands are steaming milk and pulling shots, and you're talking to a customer. You have to give a customer something when they walk in. So you give them a smile or some kind of acknowledgement. Welcoming them takes a little bit more, not much, but it many times happens at the register.
Yeah, so the person at the register really has to take on the mantle of host.
Yeah, a lot of times.
A lot of times.
Yep.
And that's strange. So, in coffee shops, we tend to put the person with the least amount of experience on the register.
Right. It's true.
Where that might be the most critical position.
Yeah.
And not that you can't do that.
Right.
But maybe training on hospitality is one of the first things.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I certainly have done this myself. I'm sure you have too, where the register interaction is totally awkward. And
it happens.
It happens. And it does set a tone for the expectation for the rest of the time. It doesn't have to be smooth, but if it's genuine, then and I guess it takes a certain personality too.
Well, yeah. I think you're right about that. But if something is a little off, but honest and genuine, it's easier to cover that ground because there's a little bit of trust there. And if I get off on the wrong foot, and it's obvious that it's not intentional, it really is easy to make up ground just by being nice. I mean,
I would much prefer, and it maybe this is, I don't think it's controversial to say, I would prefer somebody be genuine, loving, welcoming, and awkward, than polished, robotic. And I know I'm creating straw men right now out of this. Like, I know that there's a point in between. You can be more refined.
Right.
You don't have to be awkward, but there's something nice and refreshing about honest service and being welcomed into in a very real way.
Right. I think I don't think it's overly simplistic to say be yourself, but I think that is a wonderful way to behave at a bar, at a place where you're serving people a drink of any sort. I think being yourself is good, but of course, as long as it's being hospitable. If you are not a hospitable person, maybe work on that and then be yourself.
Later. Yeah. Don't be yourself right away if that's not you.
Right.
So now we've had an acknowledgement. They are noticed. They feel welcomed. Like that acknowledgement wasn't just a perfunctory, check mark on the checklist. They know that you mean it now, and they've experienced it, awkward or otherwise. Right. And now the hard part comes because I think this is where we drop the ball a lot, and it's and I don't say we like Sunergos, and I'm sure that exists as well here, but we kind of abandon people after the order is placed, and that's kind of the thing that included seeks to solve. Acknowledged, welcomed, and now they're included. So now we're responsible for them for the entirety of their visit. So what does included look like to you?
Well, I think And again, it really does vary from person to person. But I think there are many people who don't want to be included. And then usually they make that clear. We don't need to include people in things as a rule that don't want to experience that at a shop. And that is great. But what happens a lot here is people get a drink for here and they hang out. And it's important that we don't continue our personal conversation over there while they're sipping their drink very close proximity to us. Like, this shop is very small, but even still, no matter where your shop is and no matter how big it is, if a customer is having their beverage in your proximity, it's important, I think, to maybe include them and let them be a part of something, because that's the assumption in this acknowledge, welcome, include thing. The assumption is that there is a progression of relationship in this situation. We go from showing up to feeling, which is welcome. I feel like a lot of being welcome is on one person's part a feeling, and so we progress from there to being included into something bigger, which is one of my favorite things about the coffee world, is that it's about sharing, I think. So including them into whatever we got going on, I think, is a magical thing, and it can vary from person to person. But sometimes it means like offering them up part of the story that was already told and letting them be a part of it. I find it works here a lot. They're actually interested in stuff, and so including them is I have found an enhancing part of what we do here.
So including them in the conversations that might be happening between staff members too.
Sometimes, yep.
Those private conversations that happen, where the heads never really turn in the direction of the pickup bar.
Right.
Those are really painful to watch.
Right.
And that's an interesting thing to do, is to sort of rope people into the conversation as you kind of sense that they are willing to be roped in. Obviously. Right.
Oh, yes. Obviously, this is about the customer. It's always customer focused about what they want. But many times it's clear by the way they're standing and where they are that they are willing to be a part of something.
And it's not simply about your conversations, though. It's also making it about them too, isn't it?
Yep.
So how does that work out? Like, it's not that you're just saying, "Hey, why don't you talk about what we're talking about, Nick?" How do we make it so that we are taking our cues for how to make people feel included by making them the pilot of their experience? Yes,
I think a lot of that has to do with relinquishing them of responsibility to meet our expectations. When I tell a joke to a customer that I was telling to my coworker, I don't need them to respond a certain way for it to go okay. I'm just offering them something, just like our coffee. We offer it. What they do with it is up to them. I'm not going to get upset if they don't like the joke. I'm not funny. I tell dad jokes a lot. They're only funny because I'm laughing at myself. But what a customer does with what we invite them into is really up to them. We just offer it. We just offer an experience.
So at what point do you switch or know that you need to switch between offering them something and then kind of asking them things? So, we don't have expectations of customers necessarily, but sometimes we want to ask them, how was your day going? Or different things that offer them an opportunity to steer the conversation.
Yeah, I think the hard part about that, to answer right now, is that it is, again, individualistic, and so much of what we do here is a part of a relationship that's built over time. Mm-hmm. But by them eventually having trust to share things with us after we've just kind of brought them into funny stuff, they eventually have trust to share things with us, and asking them how their day's going varies from day to day based on what we know they're going through.
Right.
And this is stuff that all people that work in cafes for a while understand, is that when you have relationships with customers, you understand more about what they're going through sometimes, and you cater what you say to them based on what you know. And so it really does vary from customer to customer on that.
So included is not simply included in our conversation. It's kind of included in this space and all of the different meanings that the space takes on throughout the day.
Yeah, totally.
So it could mean something different on Tuesday than it means on Thursday.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because a customer does create the culture in some ways.
They're very much a part of it. Customers will sometimes come in and not buy coffee, and they'll hang out and we'll talk about stuff. And there's a lot that's understood here about, what's, being polite to others and knowing who's around you. There's a lot of that. Mm-hmm. But it's very much, customers are a part of what we do here. It's not just us,
Yeah, they're co-creators of this experience.
Yeah, which I think takes a lot of the pressure off of us. We do wear responsibility to sometimes steer things away from getting to certain topics or speaking in a certain way, gauging who's around and all that. And we have to be responsible here, but we also find it important to help customers be a part of what we do while also like maintaining a responsibility. But I think it takes some pressure off of us as well, letting customers be a part of it.
So acknowledging, welcoming, and including people in the space is a simple 3-part framework that anybody can use and adjust to their particular need. But it takes prioritization. Like you would have to come into the cafe recognizing that this is the overarching, mission for your hospitality today. So, what would you say to people? What's some advice that you would give to people who are trying to dial in their service according to these 3 steps?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, while it's important that we be ourselves and in our growth understand what that means, and while we need to keep ourselves in check, we also need to, I think, make sure it's about the customer. Like the acknowledge, welcome, include is things that, like, those are things we are doing, but it's not about us. It is about the customer. And I think that's easy to forget, but important to remember that it is a customer focused, and, use whatever words you want ultimately. But as long as you're finding ways to serve the customer as they are needed, I think things are going to organically grow and in a way that's going to serve them. So I've noticed a lot of obstacles in acknowledging, welcoming, and including customers, including expectations that we all show up with on our part, including how customers are expected to behave, and any number of socially learned expectations that we've kind of picked up. There's customers that are unresponsive, or show up on the phone or having a conversation with someone with them. But what has helped me is simply offering and wanting to serve them without expecting them to respond the way I want.
Right.
I found that important for me, and being accepting of how people choose to be reasonably, which does take a lot of the pressure off ourselves, to not be so affected by how people respond. Just acknowledging them as we see fit, and welcoming them, based on what would serve them best, that particular person best, and including them on their level, not how would serve us best. I think that is easy for me to forget, but important still.
So acknowledged, welcomed, and included. Pretty simple. It is a good starting place if you're just getting into being a barista and you're wondering how you can show hospitality to people. I feel like this is a great place to start. And even if you're a veteran of the industry, I feel like this is a good reminder. It's like learning scales for a musician. These are things that speak to the human condition. We all want those 3 things.
Yeah.
And a cafe as a public space among all these other needy people, right? We need more than coffee.
Yeah.
We're here not just for the coffee.
Coffee for people. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Yeah.
This is a great tool for us to use, and I'm really grateful that we got to chat about this.
Yeah, me too.
Because I feel like this brings a huge amount of value. I mean, it's simple, but it's powerful. So, any last words?
Well, thanks for having me on. It's been an honor and a pleasure, Chris.
So I hope that in future conversations that you have either with yourself or your staff about hospitality, I hope that this is what you think of. Are we acknowledging welcoming and including people, and how well are we doing those things? You can measure them by just observing your bar and seeing how many people are truly acknowledged when they come in, truly welcomed, and then feel included within the culture of the store. So some of the great points made about these things: when you're acknowledging somebody, you're taking a moment to let them know that you see them. And being seen is one of those things that doesn't really happen that often for people during the day. And by, like Philip says, when you're just really busy and you acknowledge them with, like, lift your head a little bit, a raise of the eyebrow or whatever is appropriate for that person, a smile, it's more than just a passing glance. And if you're furiously working on the bar and you look up real quick and you meet eyes with somebody, oftentimes it kind of looks like you're scared. So make sure that your acknowledgement of the person is a purposeful acknowledgement. We're not just talking about recognizing that somebody else has entered the room. It's a hospitable way of acknowledging somebody is essentially bestowing them with the honor of your attention and goodwill behind that attention. So it's not just a passing glance. It's a smile. It's something that lets them know that this is going to be a good experience. So once somebody has entered the room, and we are all sensitive to them entering the room and acknowledge their presence, that they are a valuable presence in our store, and they are a human being of worth. I mean, that's the kind of look or gesture that we want to give them is, you matter, and you matter enough for me to acknowledge you. The next thing that you want to do is welcome them. And we talked about how it's a little bit similar welcoming somebody. And oftentimes I feel like if you do a good job acknowledging, you might call victory too quickly. You might think that you have welcomed them. And indeed, there is a welcoming aspect to acknowledgement. But welcoming is like taking it the next level. Now you're engaging with the individual. And like Philip was explaining, it happens mostly at the cash register when people are ordering, where the conversation first starts. Now it's them talking to you and you picking up on pieces of information about what they need, what they're open to, and kind of filing these things away where they'll become useful for how you tailor your service to them at a later time or immediately, or, maybe over weeks, who knows. But making them feel welcome is all about your posture. It's all about how you engage them by not rushing them, by not forcing conversation on them, by letting them know it's okay to be themselves in the space. They don't need to, we didn't talk about this, but I think that it's implied. When you're yourself, you don't put on a facade of knowing what you're talking about coffee. So one of the classic and maybe overused examples in the industry is the one of having to say the right thing to the barista in order to gain the barista's respect. But welcoming somebody is it's embracing them the way they came in. It's not forcing them to fit a mold that you have set for whether or not you will accept them. So think of welcoming as an embrace. How you bring them to the cash register, how you interact with them, how you guide them across the bar to pick up their drink, how you answer their questions with patience and empathy without making them feel small. This is all part of making them feel welcomed. And genuinely, you should be hiring people, and you yourself should be the type of person who naturally wants to provide that type of experience for a customer. It is intuitive. There isn't necessarily a magic bullet point list or PowerPoint presentation or whatever that you can use with an employee or even yourself, if it happens to be you, to change from inhospitable to hospitable. So it's important, if hospitality is your goal, and I believe that it should be, staff your bar with people who naturally want to either learn to do it well and or are able to do it well. So Now that they're welcomed and they feel like they can kind of let their guard down a little bit more, they are now included. They are to be included not only in the conversations that you have on bar, which I think is fantastic, but also included in the sense that they can contribute to the culture and the conversation and the direction of the conversation. I think too often I feel alienated when I'm picking up a coffee from a bar. And unfortunately, this has happened on our bars, and this is just natural, where two baristas will be having a conversation, and it's not like they're gossiping or anything. They're just talking, but there's a customer really close to them. And the fact that they're not included in that conversation naturally implies a barrier that makes for an awkward interaction once you hand the drink over, because now you have to re-engage in the acknowledgement. Because, in fact, you have to acknowledge first that you disengaged. That's what makes it awkward in my mind. Is it's almost like you're admitting at that point that you bring the drink over to them that they're still there and you didn't recognize them. So including a guest in what's going on in the store helps them first feel like they have some ownership of what happens. And I truly believe that is one of the most powerful aspects of coffee shops. When you open a store and it's not had any customers yet, there's a lot of potential energy there, but it doesn't feel like a home. It doesn't feel like a vibrant space yet, because history has not happened. And a history of that space that is comprised of both the contributions of the staff and the customers and the intersection between those two groups is what makes a really great feeling coffee house feel great. And including a customer is a real key to that. So remember, when a guest comes into your store, they naturally want to be acknowledged, welcomed, and included. They're not going to ask it directly, but it's something that you have to apply for yourself and your staff and hold each other accountable to. The customer is not going to hold you accountable for giving them good service. This is our responsibility as service professionals. It's literally what we do for a living. And so, yeah, it can be busy, it can be hard, and emotionally taxing. But if we work as a team and we have an understanding about how we also look out for one another, if one person is feeling down or sick, one other person who's feeling stronger on the team can pick up the slack where the other feels weak. So it takes a team of people who have a common goal. And Philip's 3-part mantra of acknowledged, welcomed, and included, I think, is a really great place for you and your staff to start. And I think if you talk about this a lot, if you focus on how you can execute it, if you include your staff in creating different ways for your space that people feel acknowledged, welcomed, and included, then you're going to find all the other aspects of hospitality just sort of fall into place, because these 4 tenets are the foundation of everything else we do in hospitality. So my thanks again to Philip for sitting down and talking with me about this thing that we are the beneficiaries of here at Sunergos. We get to see this so often, and our customers have benefited greatly from this. I know yours will too. Philip, thank you so much for your insights. We are the better for it here at Keys to the Shop, for sure. So if you want to know more about Keys to the Shop, you can visit keystotheshop.com, our website, and you can go to the resources tab and find the show notes for this episode and all of our past episodes. Those are just PDFs that you can download onto your computer and read the main points from each episode, along with links for resources mentioned in those episodes. Is really, really helpful. If you wanted to use anything from our past guests or solo episodes for use in your cafe or your personal development, that's what those are for. And also, if you would be so kind as to go to iTunes and give this show a rating or review, let us know how the show has helped you or your staff or your shop improve and grow as a coffee service professional. That would mean an awful lot. And if you want to reach out directly to me, you can do so by emailing Chris at keystotheshop.com. I would love to hear from you and If you have any questions or need clarification about anything mentioned on past episodes or things that I can help you with, or if you need to be guided to resources for further development in certain areas of your career, I'd be more than willing to help out in that way as well. So I would encourage you to go from here, think about ways that you can apply what you just heard on this episode to your situation on your bar in your personal practice. How can you make guests acknowledged, welcomed, and included? Think about that mantra, apply it to the things that you do on bar, and see if it doesn't positively impact the hospitality of your space. I think it definitely will. Thank you all again for your time and your attention. I hope that you have an amazing week. And as always, I also hope that this episode, as well as every other episode on this show, has given you keys to the shop.